The KLA hold the whip hand here now. There is a state of lawlessness that grew directly out of the manner of Kosovo's liberation. The KLA sprang from the desperation of a brutally oppressed people for whom peaceful resistance had failed. The war in neighbouring Bosnia taught them the value of a resort to the gun. Even the children understand it.
If there is a message that is being sent to the Kosovars, if you want to draw international attention, you have to fight for it. That is exactly it. You need to use violence to achieve your goals.
From the remote wooded hillsides of rural Kosovo, they embarked on a strategy to draw the world's most powerful military alliance into their struggle. They began in the villages from which they sprang. A shadowy civilian militia force emerging from and melting back into the civilian population that sustained them. They aimed to make the roads that held Kosovo together too dangerous for the Serb forces to control them.
It was a hit-and-run strategy done usually by very small groups of 3 to 4 people, and the aim of these ambushes was to promote themselves.
Ta pretnja je zapravo tada shvaćena kao ozbiljna koja može da kasnije preraste, što može biti nepovoljno po vojsku Jugoslavije.
They began to ambush Serb patrols, killing policemen, then disappearing as rapidly as they had struck, an invisible commando force. Serb casualties mounted. Would the West see them as victims of terrorism or of a legitimate people's uprising?
Killing postmen or killing Serb civilians in cold blood, those are terrorist acts that we do believe were wrong. And unfortunately, that was what the KLA was pursuing at the time.
It was a calculated but dangerous gamble. The KLA's political leader, Hashim Thaçi, now admits that he knew the Serbs would retaliate against innocent civilians.
Kemi pasur parasysh gjitha ato se çka ajo mund të bëj, edhe me popullatën civile. Ne kemi qenë të bindur se do të sakrifikojmë, po do të pëson edhe popullatët civile.
Their desperate calculation was to draw the world into Kosovo's feud.
The more civilians were killed, the chances of international interventions became bigger. And the KLA, of course, realized that. There was this foreign diplomat who once told me, look, unless you pass the quota of 5,000 deaths, you'll never have anybody permanently present in Kosovo from the foreign diplomacy.
On March the 5th, 1998, Serb forces attacked the home of a leading KLA commander called Adem Yashari in the stronghold of Prekaz. The Serbs regarded this as legitimate anti-terrorist policing. It was the start of a brutal campaign that would lose them Kosovo.
About 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the morning, we just saw about 2,000 or 200 soldiers or police. They were coming up.
As their home was being destroyed, even the Yashari children understood the value of appealing to the world, as though heirs to an ancient tradition of epic tale-telling.
Shtëpiat po na i kollin. Po vrasin gjën. Fëmin, po na i kollin shtëpiat. Kërkush nuk ndërhyn këtë Kosovë shkrejten. Gratë po na i kollin, fëmijët po na i kollin, po na i vrasin, po na i lanë për males, po finas me shkum i marr, krejt rreth e kum. Kërkush nuk na nimon. Hej, ku po shumë po jetojnë amërista. Çka i kena dënuat shumë kësaj Serbi? Shtëpiat na i kanë kallë krejt. Prekazin krejt.
Pa to je bila jedna klasična policijska akcija koja je izvedena u tom selu. Ja ne poznajem detalje o tome, samo znam da se radilo o hapšenju poznatog kriminalca i čoveka koji je osuđen za krivična dela po zakonima naše zemlje i da je uspešno izvedeno, druge detalje ne znam.
These are the details he doesn't care to remember. 53 members of the Ashari family were killed. What were KLA ambushes compared to this? Albanian leaders appealed to the wider world.
As soon as we got the photographs, we put them on the internet because that was the most horrendous thing we had seen until then. Kids shot, dead, were images of a war that people needed to see. We were shocked and we thought that other people needed to see this because this was getting out of control.
4 days later, foreign ministers from Allied countries met at Lancaster House in London. A shared enmity toward Milosevic was making allies of a shadowy band of guerrillas and the most powerful nations on earth. The ambitions of the KLA and the intentions of the NATO allies were converging.
Good afternoon.
The massacre at Prekaz made popular heroes of the KLA. Kosovo's cornfield cavalry grew exponentially. It was openly challenging the mighty Yugoslav army to do its worst. Thousands answered the call to arms. They were ill-disciplined and untrained. It was a spontaneous uprising of village militias. With renewed confidence that the world was at last taking heed, the KLA made astonishing advances. From countryside strongholds, they now held major cities in their sights. The KLA's summer confidence didn't last long. Milosevic responded with a ruthless and indiscriminate counter-offensive. The KLA were immediately on the run. But not only the KLA. Hundreds of thousands of Albanian civilians also fled. As the autumn chill closed in, they faced starvation and disease. These pictures pushed international opinion over the edge. NATO told Milosevic to pull his forces back to barracks. For the first time, they backed it with a threat to bomb. Milosevic agreed to an immediate ceasefire.
Dogovori koje smo postigli u celini su u skladu sa interesima.
He agreed to allow international observers into Kosovo and to limit his troop numbers. It seemed that the threat of force had worked. But Milosevic had another reason for agreeing to the ceasefire. His fight, he believed, was over for now. He had completed his military task.
Likvidirana sva teroristička jezgra, razbijeni teroristi koji su u najvećem broju ili predali oružje, ili su ostavili oružje i pobegli van Kosmeta.
Milosevic pulled his troops back to barracks. Diplomacy backed by force appeared to be the way to deal with him. But it was a miscalculation. When the Allies were to try it again just 4 months later, it would lead them to war. Walker's ceasefire monitors drove round Kosovo in brightly coloured orange vehicles. Their job was to watch as Milosevic withdrew his police and returned his troops to barracks. In the beginning, he complied. The German general Klaus Naumann had helped broker the ceasefire deal.
He really did what we had asked him to do. He withdrew within 48 hours some 6,000 police officers and the military back into the barracks. This was also confirmed by the OSCE verification mission.
This, though, was much harder to monitor. Where the Serbs withdrew, the KLA moved forward, filling the vacuum, for the ceasefire agreement had a fatal flaw. It was one-sided. It had required nothing verifiable from the KLA.
Ja zakonisht I dobishëm për neve dhe na mundsoi që të reorganizohen, të konsolidohen dhe të rritem praktikisht në mënyrë organizative, në mënyrë kualitative, në mënyrë kuantitative.
They were really growing ever stronger from day to day, and there was nobody to really stop them.
Dhe kemi punu në këtë drejtim që sa ma në një sipërfaqe sa ma të zera, po në tërë Kosovën të formohen njësit e ushtrisë shqiptare të Kosovës, të formohen qelizat e ushtrisë shqiptare të Kosovës.
At Podujevo in the north of Kosovo, the KLA now filled the very positions the Serbs had vacated. The pattern was repeated across the province. William Walker's deputy was a British general. He and his colleagues could see what the KLA was doing, but had no means of stopping or even discouraging it.
The Kosovo Liberation Army infiltrated forward.
The KLA basically came back into its old positions that they held before the summer offensive.
And this then started to be a factor in dealing with the Serbs, because the Serbs said to us, well, hang on, the deal was that we withdrew from these things and you were going to police the agreement. So can you just get these Kosovo Liberation Army out of the trenches that we were in a month ago?
But they couldn't. At NATO headquarters there was growing disquiet. We've obtained confidential minutes of the North Atlantic Council, or NAC, NATO's governing body. They talk of the KLA as the main initiator of the violence, and state it has launched what appears to be a deliberate campaign of provocation. This is how William Walker himself reported the situation then in private.
Ambassador Walker stated in the NAC that the majority of violations was caused by the KLA.
How far did the KLA have to go in order to jeopardize international backing?
Well, again, there would have been a point. I don't know where that point came. They never obviously reached it.
But there was no clear mechanism to punish them if they failed to behave in what you call a reasonable way.
Well, I think the punishment was that they would lose completely the backing of the United States and the contact group.
With US backing for the KLA now barely concealed, Milosevic sent the army back into action to clear the KLA out of Podujevo. The doomed procession to war with NATO had begun. The KLA continued to smuggle arms over mountain passes from Albania. Albanian civilians were press-ganged into service. Before dawn on the 15th of December, they walked into a well-prepared Serbian ambush. Most of those taken by surprise fled back into Albania. But 31 Albanian men were killed. Later on the same day, in an apparent act of revenge, what remained of ethnic coexistence in the city of Peć nearby was to be torn apart. A group of hooded, masked men drove up to this bar, which was popular with young Serbs.
Ništa se nije dešavalo do trenutka kada su se samo vrata odškrinula i čuli smo rafale koji su pokosili svu tu djecu koja su sedela za stolovima.
Lazar's teenage son, Ivan, was in the bar. He was a bright and promising schoolboy who'd come top of his class.
Doista stravična slika jednoga koji je i mogao da se kreće i da krv na sve strane. Ivan nije imao šansu da preživi. Bio je prvi na vratima. Sedao je na barskoj stolici na samim vratima. Znači da je njega prvog zakačilo.
Ali situacija u gradu Peći već je postala nepodnošljiva. Srpski narod nije mogao da gleda šiptarski narod, jer im je ubio 6 nedužne dece. A također i albanski narod nije mogao da gleda srpski narod. Niko nije bio svestan šta će se desiti.
There was nothing remarkable about Ratchak, except that by January 1999, the KLA had moved in, most of the villagers had fled, and trenches had been dug on the edge of the village.
We encountered many villages where the villagers themselves told us in very clear terms that they would prefer to be left completely alone. Oftentimes they felt that if a KLA group were to come into their village, that would actually put them under greater threat.
From camouflage positions near Ratchak, the KLA launched well-prepared hit-and-run strikes against Serb patrols. In early January, they killed 4 Serb policemen.
Se potën që po vinë kënina dhe ditëm që do t'im për në ranë sanina. Dhe atëherë përgatitëm dhe morëm sulëm ndaj tyre. Bishe ajo konë sakë gjithë, sërë që kemi morë aksione, a i dikon karata ndaj civilve.
Ratchak did not have long to wait for that retaliation. The attack began on the morning of January the 15th.
Betejë arrakt, një betejë që edhe neve në ka kushtua, po i mërada shumë ushtarë sërbë, po ashtu i rrëb dhe ka qenë me gjdo kusht që të shkaktuat aty një masake, pasi që aty ka qenë një ndër bazat më të fuqishme të UÇK-s dhe kjo ka ndikuar që edhe aty të zhvillohet një
International observers watched from safe high ground as Serb forces took control of the village. They moved from house to house. Most were empty. The KLA had gone. When Serb forces pulled out in the afternoon, they announced they'd killed 15 KLA men in the action. The international monitors entered the village and reported nothing unusual. Only next morning did the full force of Serb retaliation become apparent. William Walker went to see for himself.
We progressed up the hill, and about every 15, 20 yards there was another body. And so we kept going up the hill, and I don't know how many bodies we passed before we got to a pile of bodies.
In the location where there's 15 bodies,
By the time Walker arrived, the KLA had retaken control of Ratchak.
KLA guys, which we are not able to see.
I think it's going to take me a few minutes to determine what I really should say, and I'd like to hold a press conference in Pristina later this afternoon.
The facts as verified by KVM include evidence of arbitrary detentions, extrajudicial killings,
and the mutilation of unarmed civilians of Albanian ethnic origin in the village of Račak by the MUP and VJ.
In other words, he blamed the Serbian police and the Yugoslav army. Walker's comments gave America the green light to enter Kosovo's war. The KLA had pulled in its mighty ally.
With Račak and with lots of others, Serbs were playing in the KLA hands. It will remain an, I would say, eternal dilemma whether the KLA initiated these battles in the civilianly inhabited areas because it knew that the Serbs will retaliate on them. Personally, I don't think so. But of course, it was a war.
Clearly, after Račak, extraordinary measures had to be taken.
It clearly is a galvanizing event, and the president really felt that we could then move forward.
We got the go message. Going to go tomorrow unless something stops it.
Viper 1-1, Aviano Tower, wet runway 10.
Officer 2, verify you have information, Delta.
We had the chaplain give us a few words of wisdom, which were very encouraging, and then we suited up and prepared to do the mission.
391, checkman. 346 heavy contact.
And we're off at 30.
In the absence of international observers, Serb forces began to pillage and burn and kill, with the casual cruelty they had taught the world to expect of them. Kosovo was sliding into chaos.
This
is what remains of the village of Čires. There was no military purpose to this, it was wanton, willful destruction. A preemptive campaign of revenge for NATO's threat. This group captured on camera the undiluted pleasure they took in their barbarity.
Ishte një tmerr I vërtet. Shtetit ende I vinte lufte, djegje, baruti.
The Kosovo Liberation Army recruited NATO to its cause. An old injustice was defeated here, but NATO's moral war rewarded those who took up arms.
I don't believe that any of the liberation forces or guerrilla forces in our lifetime were moved more rapidly or more successfully from total obscurity to international standing and recognition than the Kosovo Liberation Army.